Back in late 2020, I made a top 100 favorite character list from visual novels video, separated into 10 different videos. However, I'm going to attempt to update that list to order my favorite characters from visual novels as of 2023. I won't spend too much time on each individual character. For the most part, I'll talk about them in maybe 30 seconds at most. I will also make sure to have basically no spoilers for any of the characters. I'll show them in tier list format at the end of this video, so if you only care about seeing the full list without my thoughts, you can just use the timestamps below to skip ahead. But before I continue, I want to give a huge shout out to the local weeb who helped me edit this video into something that is much more presentable than what I had back in 2020. Number 100, I have Madoka Aokana from Aokana for Rhythms Across the Blue. A very common sentiment from Aokana fans I see is that Madoka is the one character many people wish actually got a route. And it's pretty easy to see why. She's very goofy, very funny in general, very willing to be the butt of many jokes. However, if they're to make a serious route about her, I could easily see the potential about her being the manager of the Flying Circus Club. There is some hope given that there's the Aokana If series. At number 99, I have The Secret Girl from Hoshizora no Memoria. For whatever reason, this visual novel kept her name a secret until you unlocked her route. Thankfully, it was very much worth it to reach the end. Let's just say all the romantic buildup was worth it, and the romance was easily the best of the other main heroines. Also, her Eternal Heart route in the fan disc helped a lot of the wholesome interactions that were missing from the original, so definitely recommend reading both routes to get the complete package for her. At number 98, I have Sara Matsunaga from Ever17. I know Sugimi is the fan favorite for this visual novel, but hey, what can I say? I'm a fan of quirky girls, and Sara fits that pretty well. Her being a hacker and a geeky girl with some quirky jokes made the slice of life scenes a lot more fun, especially since you had to go through a lot of them before getting to the actual mystery part. At number 97, I have Tsukasa Tono from Honey Honey Honey. Honey 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 was a very short, comedy-oriented visual novel. At a base personality level, Tsukasa fit exactly my type. A childhood friend that's a quirky weirdo with a goofy imagination about sexual stuff with some wholesome moments. It's just too bad the visual novel was really short, because with a more fleshed out setting and longer visual novel reading time, she likely could have done a lot higher. At number 96, I have Kanako Shigure from If My Heart Had Wings. Since Hagiha really disappointed me in her route, Kanako ended up having my favorite base personality from the series. She's definitely the closest to the quirky character of the main heroines, since she just likes to walk around in her undergarments while there's a guy around in a girls only dorm. With that aside, she's just a very chill girl who can be surprisingly helpful during dramatic situations. At number 95, I have Lise Rusenin from Princess Evangile. As she's the main heroine who hopes to bring in Masaya into the school and the biggest proponent of making the school co-ed, it was nice to see Lise have these mix of traits, as someone who's very nice to the protagonist while still having her own goals and having an interesting enough backstory and route. At number 94, I have Lise Cesarini from Symphonic Rain. On the surface, she is basically your typical shy girl, but once you learn her circumstances, you get to see exactly why she is the way she is. Her backstory really hurts, and helped make her route quite memorable, especially with all the plot twists. At number 93, I have Madoka Akitsu from Sakuranomori Dreamers. All I'm going to say is I'm really salty about how the visual novel did her dirty. Her chill, tomboy personality was something that personally appealed to me, and I hope that Manga Gamer, or somebody, eventually translates the sequel. She's apparently the main heroine there. At number 92, I have Touko Kirihara from Cross Channel. I'm generally not a fan of tsunderes, and honestly, Touko's base personality is not particularly likable. However, there are some very interesting plot twists around her that make her a lot more interesting to me than initially expected. This is in the context that basically every major character in this visual novel is pretty screwed up in some way, but somehow Touko's way of being screwed up was the most interesting to me by the end. At number 91, I have Ako Takanashi from Making Lovers. I'm generally not a fan of incest routes, mostly since their themes are very predictable and repetitive. The main reason I even liked Akio and her route was because Akio herself was pretty likable and funny. She actually had a pretty good sense of humor, while still having a little bit of that typical trademark sisterly love. I honestly think she'd be a lot higher if they just wrote her to be a childhood friend character. She essentially felt like one anyway. At number 90, I have Chihiro Himukai from Chihiro Himukai Always Walks Away. I'm very much like a higher amount of adult age romance slice of life stories we've been getting in visual novels. What helps with this visual novel is that it's a one heroine only short-ish visual novel, so the short length actually makes sense. It also has surprisingly well done friends with benefits relationship, well done than the other handful of visual novels that attempted this, so that alone is what made Chihiro stick out to me. She has a relatively chill but very caring personality with some interesting insecurities. At number 89, I have Rin Tohsaka from Fate Stay Night. Just as a minor spoiler for this list, this is probably going to be one of the few universal fan favorite characters. I mean, what's not to like about Rin? She may be tsundere, which is an archetype I tend to not like, but she's the epitome of someone who's a good action girl, but also has a very solid, fun personality outside of battles, and even surprisingly good character development in all three routes. At number 88, I have Sachi Komine from The Fruit of Grisaia. All the main heroines from Grisaia are pretty quirky in their own way, but Sachi might possibly be the quirkiest from that visual novel, with her extreme, literal-minded way of thinking and how she takes orders from people. That said, she is a nice, helpful character, and the quirks mentioned above help her make a very interesting, deep character once you read her route. At number 87, I have Kotori Habane from If My Heart Had Wings. She is the main heroine for a reason. She may not have started off particularly likable, but improves a lot through character development. The common route alone is enough to make her memorable, and she fits in perfectly with the If My Heart Had Wings heartwarming themes. At number 86, I have Haruhiko Yoshino from Rewrite. Studio Key is no stranger to making bro characters visual novels, but Yoshino is a surprisingly unique take on one. He has a little bit of mix of a tsundere lone wolf type of character with a little bit of a chuuni streak, and many times Kotaro, the main character, makes fun of him, with Yoshino ending up quite angry, but makes for a lot of hilarious scenes. But Yoshino is surprisingly helpful for the drama in a few routes, which helps keep him on this list. At number 85 and 84, I'm actually going to do a double ranking in one, with the couple Akio and Sanae Furukawa from Clannad. Getting parents to even show up in visual novels is a rarity as is. Getting parents for the main heroine of this series is even rare. Getting parents that are a good couple and stay together the whole story and stay important in the story are even rare. Akio and Sanae are definitely the perfect examples of how to make a parent couple in a visual novel work well. Have them have their good mix of their own unique comedy while still being very helpful during specific drama. Both of them even have their own unique backstory, which makes you think of how you could be the best parents possible. At number 83, I have Mashiro Arisaka from Aokana. This is a funny one, as I actually started off not really liking Mashiro all that much due to her excessive simping for Misaki and her tsundere attitude towards Masaya. However, her route ended up having by far the most wholesome romance, which helped my opinion of her a lot. And then her fandisc, Aokana Extra 1, has straight up one of the most wholesome fandisc routes I have ever read in any visual novel. It's just a shame she's not very likable to me and outside of her routes, because she'd be a lot higher otherwise. At number 82, I have Raiha Raikkonen from Marshmallow All the Way Home. Raiha in the common route was excellent. She arguably had the best story in the common route, starting as someone who clearly was not into her job, but due to the influence of the main group of characters, as well as the backstory about her, I ended up really liking how her character development played out. Her base personality is appealing to me too, having a mix of the tease with a little quirkiness. I just wish her heroine route didn't play out the way it did. At number 81, I have Naruto Komorie from Sankaku Renai. Similar to Akio from Making Lovers, I'm not really a fan of incest routes, especially if they're stepsisters. However, Naruto is someone I mostly like just because she's just really funny. She has a lot of goofy humor, like how she's a big fan of idols, she's a bit savage, and has some random horny jokes. At number 80, I have Orihime Shiratori from A Sky Full of Stars. Of all the routes and the characters in the whole series, Orihime is by far the most chill. As the original president of the Six Stars Club, you can feel her passion for wanting to get as many people to enjoy the stars as possible. Her route has by far the least amount of melodrama, and all she wants to do is enjoy some nice romance time while enjoying the stars more with her boyfriend, while still having her own little quirks. She's definitely a good example of how to make a good, chill, likable senpai. At number 79, I have Hotaru Minazuki from Amatsutsumi. Hotaru at the way beginning of the story is fairly likable, but has a lot of mystery around her. She's definitely one of those characters where the more you learn about her, the more interesting she gets. While she wasn't my favorite in terms of personality, she was still likable, and I have to admit, it's her depth that really makes her stick out and makes the true route of Amatsutsumi very much worth reading on its own. At number 78, I have Habane Suo from the Fruit of Grisaia. On the surface, compared to the other main 5 heroines, she seems to be the most sane. However, she has her own quirks that are a little bit more subtle and definitely has a backstory that's quite possibly the most memorable in the whole series. Outside of that, I can't deny that I might just have a thing for those big sis tall characters who likes making sexual jokes. At number 77, I have Yoru Kazuto from If My Heart Had Wings. Choosing my favorite route in If My Heart Had Wings is really tough because a lot of them are both really good, but also just follow a really similar flowchart. But oddly enough, I think I might actually like Yoru's route the most. Seeing a stoic, smart girl getting into the glider stuff was actually quite interesting, especially related to her backstory. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually liked the romance plot twist that happened, since a lot of it was due to her idea. At number 76, I have Cinnamon from Nekopara. I'm going to admit right now, I'm generally not a big fan of Nekomimi or Cat Girls. And honestly, I just considered Nekopara as a series pretty okay at best. Cinnamon is basically only this high because I really like Dere personalities, and I think her constant horny jokes are still pretty funny. At number 75, I have Fumiko Dozaki from Bokuten, Why I Became an Angel. This is actually a character that only shows up in a chapter of the Common Route, and does not have any romantic development with the main character. While her Common Route chapter wasn't my favorite one, I still quite liked it, and she was my favorite Common Route exclusive character. The writers made a bold choice giving her a character design like hers, and writing the romance story the way they did. What helps make her interesting was her relatable, low self-esteem and uses over the internet. At number 74, I have Haruko Kamio from Air. Just FYI, this is the only character on this list where I've only watched the anime adaptation and have not read the visual novel at all. You know how I said earlier how much I like Akio and Sanae for their representation of parents in visual novels? I thought Haruko was a step above them, because a lot of her role in Air was getting developed in terms of being a good step-parent, something that's arguably harder than being a good blood parent. At number 73, I have Chris Friedrich from Magikoi. Chris is a pretty polarizing character that gets quite a lot of hate, but to be honest, outside a few moments, I never really disliked her. I thought her constant humor about her liking things like Inari and feudal Japan was pretty funny. Once again, more foreigner humor. She arguably had the most character development in the Common Route outside of Yukie, and, at least in the original visual novel, had a few really good moments, like in Miyako's route, where she was easily the star of the show. At number 72, I have Yukako Kurusu from Ninki Seiyu. I like all 3 routes in Ninki Seiyu as they cover different parts of being in the voice acting career. In Yukako's case, she's already established and popular, so her character development was all about dealing with someone that's popular and what she wants to do in her free time, and dealing with the pressures and all that stuff. Yukako herself was also a pretty wholesome girl, which is nice to see, especially since she was also a secret gamer girl. At number 71, I have Hikari Hokuboshi from A Sky Full of Stars. Hikari is an interesting case where she's a childhood friend we actually get to see a lot of flashbacks of how she was during their actual childhood. I actually thought her role in these childhood friend flashbacks were easily the highlight of her character, since they helped Akito and Saya grow into who they were into the present. Present Hikari is still pretty good with how much she influences the Six Stars Club, but maybe not as good as I was hoping. At number 70, I have Honoka Yoshioka from A Sky Full of Stars. In the original visual novel, her role was basically limited to the just kind of assistant to the Six Stars Club as a whole. However, she did have some wholesome moments that made her a fairly memorable character. She got a route in the fandisc Fine Days, and while her route had, I guess you can call it a little bit of drama, it was fine, and I liked how her route played with the idea of what would happen if the characters actually took things slow at the beginning of a relationship. Well, at least for Moege's standard. At number 69, I have Mikan from Wanko to Kuraso. Like I said in Cinnamon's section, I'm not really a fan of animal girls. However, Wanko to Kuraso setting actually made the dog girl's role a lot more interesting compared to Nekopara. In Mikan's case, she starts off being an abandoned stray, and seeing her grow into a wholesome dog girl who wants to be a good social worker was really good development to see. At number 68, I have Itsumi Seno from Ninki Seiyu. As opposed to Yukako, who's an established voice actor, Seno has no natural talent. Her development about this is what made her route so good. Her route ended up sticking out as easily the best of the main 3. At number 67, I have Kazuma Takanashi from Making Lovers. This could technically just be all the protagonists from all SME visual novels, since they kind of have similar personalities where they're open degenerates that love to joke around with perverted humor. However, they are all pretty proactive, wholesome main guys who are willing to help the heroine in need without being too simple. These aspects are what help SME protagonists be some of my favorites in visual novels, though mostly for the humor. I particularly chose Kazuma for this list because he's the oldest and a hard-working adult age character. His degenerate jokes are a little bit more limited, especially once he gets into a relationship. Number 66, I have Mikazuki Hanae from Musicus. As someone who's a fan of quirky girls in visual novels, I was definitely excited to see how Mikazuki turned out. While she wasn't quite as great as I was hoping, she was still quite the interesting character, kind of being a more realistic look on the intricacies of how a quirky girl like her would actually act in real life, especially since she compares herself to her brother in terms of how good she is at being in a band. At number 65, I have Yuzuyu Hiragi from Fureraba. If there's one thing I can respect about SME, it's that they're really good at making tsunderes pretty likable. She does start off like your usual tsundere, aka kind of a bitch, but it's at least neutered down by how much the protagonist trolls her. Once you get into her route, she softens up incredibly quickly, and her route ends up being extremely wholesome to match, which is a nice breath of fresh air compared to most tsunderes, who usually end up doing the thing where they switch personalities too often. At number 64, I have Kanon Kusakabe from Marshmallow All the Way Home. I feel like pure dere main heroines are becoming surprisingly more rare in moege, and visual novels in general. I'm glad Kanon ended up being pretty likable, with a little bit of quirkiness. I think the most stick-out thing about her is how the story emphasizes that her wholesome personality is what helps keep the sweets shop afloat, and you get to see a lot of these moments in the comm route and a little bit in heroine routes. Number 63, I have Sylvie from Wanko to Karaso. A lot of what I said about Mikan applies to Sylvie, but to a slightly higher degree. Sylvie comes from an even darker past before she joins the main group of characters. However, all it did was make her character development and growing closer to her own owner and family that much more heartwarming. At number 62, I have Emma Tachibana from Fashioning Little Miss Lonesome. Out of the handful of otome, or visual novels targeted at girls, that I've read, Fashioning is the only one I've actually completed. A big part of it is because I thought Emma, the main protagonist, was hilarious. She has this really gloomy, sarcastic personality, and that whole over-the-top scenario of her being forced to be a model got a lot of hilarious, snarky remarks from her. The pure relatability of how much of a loner she is was pretty funny too. While I wasn't big on her actual love interests, or the romance for that matter, Emma's humor is what kept me going to finish the visual novel. She was just that funny to me. At number 61, I have Saber from Fate's Stay Night. Fate's Stay Night was the first visual novel I ever read, and Saber was one of the characters that made me realize I tend to like girls wearing armor. I'm talking girls like Leona from League of Legends or Hilda from Soul Calibur. While Saber objectively isn't really anything special compared to other fighter sword girls, she'll always have a special place in my heart, especially considering that she has a surprisingly deep backstory, and how her role being completely different in each of the three routes was really interesting. At number 60, At number 60, I have Aoi Muko from You and Me and Her, A Love Story, usually known as Totone. From a base personality, she should have easily been a lot higher on this list. She definitely fits my definition of the super weirdo trope that I tend to like a lot, while still having some surprisingly wholesome moments. Sadly, there's a bunch of ways I didn't like how the plot treated her, which keeps her lower on this list than I would have liked, but it says something that I like her base personality that much to keep her on the list regardless. At number 59, I have Kohaku from Tsukihime. I thought Kohaku easily had the most interesting personality and backstory of all the main heroines. She was easily the highlight of the whole visual novel, and I'm really excited to see how she's treated in the upcoming remake. Sadly, I can't say too much more about her without spoilers. At number 58, I have Elena Olegna Oven from Draku Riot. This was the first Yuzusoft character I really liked, and she was easily my favorite from Drakurite. There's not many well-done tease pervert characters done right, and Elena has a good balance of cracking enough sexual jokes while also being a decently deep enough character herself. It says something when she got a clone character in Cafe Stella as the main heroine. At number 57, I have Shion Sonozaki from Higurashi, When They Cry. I admittedly liked her from the moment she was a tease to Keiichi, the main protagonist. However, I thought what really stuck out about her was the reveals and the lengths that she went to, but also how her chapter made her change going forward. That's basically all I can say without spoilers. At number 56, I have Konatsu Izumi from Koikari, Love for Hire. For some reason, the twins tend to be the least liked characters in this visual novel, but I thought they were easily my favorites. Konatsu definitely fits a lot of the comedy tropes that I tend to like, a mix of super quirky, weird, savage remarks, as well as a lot of perverted jokes. Not my favorite Hasa Project heroine, but definitely very funny most of the time. At number 55, I have Mashiro Toba from Root Double. Mashiro is the token childhood friend character from a not-so-romance-heavy visual novel. It was nice to see Mashiro have a lot of the childhood friend tropes that I tend to like, while still fitting them in the mystery thriller genre visual novel. It helps that there's a twist about her that I quite like that helps push her up this high. At number 54, I have Kokoro Fushikawa from the Majikoi series. I'm so sad she never got another route after Majikoi S, because I thought Kokoro was easily one of the most stick-out girls of the non-main 5 heroines of the original. Her constant smug attitude was pretty funny to see, but everybody basically disrespecting her, and her reactions were even funnier. However, there's a surprising amount of depth from her that I liked got covered in a little bit of her route and other routes. At number 53, I have Tsubaki Miwa from Jisenjo no Mao. I know Haru is generally the fan favorite, and I can certainly see why, but I just thought Tsubaki's story was a lot more interesting to me. On the surface, she is just your typical nice girl, a little bit on the passive side, but I like the visual novel using the story to have a bunch of bad stuff eventually happen to her, which causes her to have an interesting change of personality that was quite unique and something that I rarely see done in other story-based visual novels. At number 52, I have Riho Kaguya from Deer Drops. Some might call Riho a bitch, and to be fair, they're technically not wrong. However, I like that Riho was very much an unabashed bitch, and there's not many characters like her that I can think of, especially as a main heroine. Her being very blunt and savage and knowing exactly what she wants. This personality helps kickstart the band, but also makes for some surprisingly interesting romance moments in her route. At number 51, I have Hanako Ikezawa from Katawa Shoujo. While Hanako doesn't have my favorite base personality from this visual novel, she definitely had my favorite overall route. She's a shy, insecure girl at heart, but had some really interesting reveals and character development that was quite a bit different and more real than the usual shy girl trope, and I quite liked it. At number 50, I have S from Xblaze. So admittedly, I only got into Xblaze because I played S in the Blaze Blue fighting game series. Xblaze just happens to be a prequel to Blaze Blue and is a full visual novel where S actually originated from. Unfortunately, I wasn't really a big fan of the Xblaze story since I thought the characters were mostly forgettable and the main character was really annoying. Thankfully, S herself was easily the stick-out character, having some pretty feelsy character development and some cool action scenes. Though admittedly, there is some bias for this placement since she was my main or secondary in the Blaze Blue series for a while. At number 49, I have Emi Ibarazaki from Katawa Shoujo. To contrast Hanako, while I didn't like Emi's route the most, Emi definitely had my favorite personality of the main 5 heroines. I really like her energetic tomboy go-getter attitude, and her personality, in my opinion, really showcases the whole thing about all these main girls not being defined by their disabilities. And in fact, Emi is the one who has the inspiring way of using her disability to her advantage for her hobbies. At number 48, I have Shirley Warwick from Amairo Islenauts. This is one of the few characters I've only read her visual novel in Japanese. I was inspired to read it since I saw a Yuzusoft main heroine fan art that showed Shirley as a quirky manga doujin author, and that's actually her role in the visual novel, which was funny to see. She just had a lot of funny, quirky imagined spots that made her humor stick out in the common route. These imagined spots have her pair up the main character with other students, or even other students with each other, in really goofy scenarios she was making up, which is some of the funniest Ubisoft humor I've seen. Her heroine route was also pretty wholesome, despite me not really liking the whole teacher-student romance thing. At number 47, I have Ruka Hiryu from Meteor World Actor. I'll just get this out of the way. Ruka is kind of an asshole. However, I actually like how unabashedly of an asshole he is, to the point where the narrative and all the characters know how unlikable he is, and part of the reason why he works in the lowest 13th division. But his super cocky attitude actually is backed up by some secret skills that he uses in very particular moments, which get very hype and savage. At number 46, I have Yohei Tsunohara from Clannad. I don't have too many bro characters on this top 100, but Tsunohara is one of the more defining ones for me. A lot of the stupid things he says and a lot of the ways he got trolled by the main character Tomoya were ridiculously hilarious and helped make the pre-route slice of life scenes a lot more memorable. But even in his bromance route, he had some pretty interesting development as well. At number 45, I have Konomi Yanase from Princess Evangile. I'll admit, first off, Konomi wouldn't really be my first choice if we were thinking about actual romance options, in terms of me choosing who to date. However, Konomi is basically this high because I just found her really hilarious. The constant misunderstandings she had about love and relationships helped make the common route portions with her funnier, and I like how she's one of the few characters that actually got some degree of character development in the common route. At number 44, I have Sasa Misuzu from Marshmallow All the Way Home. If there's one thing I've noticed about Marmalade visual novels, it's that they tend to make the shy girls the most interesting ones to me. Sasa is an interesting case where she's definitely shy and unconfident, but has a bit of a quirky side where she tends to overstate how much of a failure she is when she messes up. However, given how Marshmallow All the Way Home has a pretty wholesome storytelling style, Sasa had one of the most stick-out character developments in the whole visual novel, both in her common route and her heroine route. I honestly just kind of wish on a personal level Sasa kept her swirly glasses from the beginning. I tend to like those for some reason. At number 43, I have Kazuki Kazumi from the Fruit of Grisaia series. The reason I like Kazuki the most isn't particularly deep. I just really like the fact that they made a OP genius girl, but with enough interesting flaws mostly related to how bad she is at a social level. But all it did was make the few relationships she actually had that much better. At number 42, I have Val Fawcett from Symphonic Rain. I won't say too much about her, but there is a certain plot twist in her route that really made this visual novel stick out to me a lot, and really started to make me question how certain heroine routes would end up, especially since this was only my second visual novel I've ever read, and Val was the first route I ever read from this visual novel. At number 41, I have Akare Yuki from Making Lovers. Believe it or not, I'm usually not one of those people that begs for minor characters that didn't have routes to get routes, because I usually end up liking one of the main heroines the most anyway. However, Akari was easily my second favorite of all the girls in Making Lovers. Her goofy, savage comedy was always a delight to see, and I would have easily taken a route for her over a Reina or even Akio route. At number 40, I have Mayu Shikibe from Riddle Joker. I think Mayu is just an overall solid, well-rounded Ubisoft heroine with a good mix of mature One-san or big sister tropes, a little bit of quirkiness that fits my personal liking, and even a little bit of dere just to top things off. But her route was also just quite enjoyable, having a good mix of actual plot with the usual wholesome romance and even friendship moments you'd expect from a Ubisoft visual novel. At number 39, I have Kyoko Asahina from Amatsutsumi. While I won't deny that Hotaru's route was the best due to her being the deepest character, I actually thought Kyoko had the most stick-out, wholesome, personal story. Her whole thing of not having friends and wanting to get more friends isn't particularly uncommon for shy girl characters, but I really enjoyed the way Kyoko's story handled it, in addition to some of the feelsy backstory stuff she had to deal with. At number 38, I have Suguru Oguchi from Majikoi. Majikoi has quite a number of pretty funny side characters, and I mean a lot, but Suguru was easily my favorite of the male side characters. Majikoi's over-the-top humor style, combined with him constantly making remarks about how he prefers 2D over 3D, and just making fun of how he represents a lot of the 2D-loving weeb stereotypes, was just really hilarious. He may not always show on screen, but at least in the original visual novel, he was always great and hilarious to hear, though unfortunately, from S onwards, he kind of just became more of a typical straight man character. At number 37, I have Chinatsu Izumi from Koikari Love for Hire. So while Konatsu was the sister I expected to like more, given my love for weird and quirky characters, I surprisingly ended up liking Shinatsu more for one big reason. They actually made a tsundere female really funny. They didn't use a lot of the typical humor that they give for tsunderes, aka stuff like hitting the main character and all that. Instead, she was more like a tsundere who was sexually frustrated, and it was really funny to see her want to get into the whole weird fake brother dating thing that she requested despite her angry overreactions and stuff. She actually ended up making me laugh a lot more often than Konatsu's weird pervert jokes. At number 36, I have Alastia Wallenberg Kezoshi from Primal X Hearts 2. As I stated in Sasa's section, I've noticed Marmalade tends to make really good and memorable shy characters. Sasa may have been a little bit more quirky, but I like Alastia more because she was just much more wholesome. She does have a little quirkiness about how she's really bad at smiling, but it just made the moments where she could actually bond with the main character and others, and have more people recognize her, and was just overall a really nice journey to see. At number 35, I have Sakura Mato from Fate Stay Night. She easily had the most wholesome personality of the main three heroines, and in my opinion, fit with Shiro the best romantically as well. Unlike apparently a lot of people on the internet, I actually really liked the cooking scenes because it showed the bond that Sakura and Shiro had. What helps is that Heavens feels easily my favorite route of Fate Stay Night, and I believe Sakura's role was a big reason why. At number 34, I have Sayori from Doki Doki Literature Club. While I overall wasn't too big on DDLC, Sayori was easily the stickout character for me. I tend to like wholesome childhood friends, so Sayori already immediately had an advantage over the others. Her goofy quotes from the beginning helped endear her to me immediately. However, what made her really stand out was how Team Salvato wrote around her mental health stuff. I think more visual novels could learn about this. At number 33, I have Sumika Kagami from the Muv-Luv series. Even though Muv-Luv Extra isn't particularly popular, even with me, the one thing that stuck out immediately was Sumika, because in my opinion, she's just the classic loud tomboy childhood friend. I actually liked how mean and savage her and Takaru were to one another. All it did was make it so the moments where they actually did legitimately become closer even better. I also really ended up liking her role later on in the series, but I won't get into that. At number 32, I have Yamato Naoe from the Majikoi series. I like Yamato a lot as a main character for two reasons. One, they actually made his role as a strategist, aka someone not physically strong, but he knows how to plan and outsmart people, usually taking advantage of and making plans about how strong his skilled female friends are, and other crafty stuff. But he's also just kind of a savage, and doesn't give a crap once he wants something, he usually gets it. I just really like that they gave him much more personality than the average, while still keeping him relatively moral. At number 31, I have Korona Kusakabe from A Sky Full of Stars. She was easily my favorite heroine from the original visual novel. While she's kind of a gremlin character to Hikari and especially Saya, I liked how openly affectionate she was to Akito, the main character, from the beginning. I like the themes around her route, how it handled both her hatred of Saya as well as her trying to find her own dream, despite being a late joiner of the Six Stars Club. At number 30, I have Mari Hanamaru from Renai X Royale. Asa Project has some of my favorite humor in visual novels, and Mari was one of the most consistently funny characters, which also made her one of the funniest childhood friends I've seen in any visual novel. Her constant, direct, savage, and stupid comments were pretty funny to me, but the most stick-out thing about her were her super goofy faces, and her route having two of the funniest H scenes I've seen in any visual novel. She also has a bit of interesting depth related to her and the main character's past, which didn't make her just a complete joke character. At number 29, I have Tomoe Kirino Kojima from Bokuten Why I Became an Angel. Tomoe easily rose up to one of my favorite visual novel protagonists after finishing Bokuten. He starts off very obviously depressed, and he clearly has some baggage that made him so obviously against love and stuff. However, through very slow but steady character development, you get to see how he originally was, and the payoff at the end of the true route is extremely good. At number 28, I have Kenichi Morita from Shara no Kuni. Picking my favorite visual novel protagonist was tough, but ultimately, I settled on Kenichi. He's, just to me, a more well-rounded version of Yuji from Grisaia. He's still pretty proactive and skilled, but counterbalanced by the main antagonist Hozuki, how he constantly gets challenged to actually outsmart him and stuff. But more importantly, I like his way of dealing with the girls' issues. He does get proactive at some parts, but for the most part, he actually just tries to help the heroine figure out their own psychological issues on their own, which was more appealing to me than just having kind of more of a Superman complex of solving all their problems himself. At number 27, I have Asuho Minahoshi from Hoshizora no Memoria. I mostly like Asuho a lot just because I just really like her execution as a Dere Dere character. There's just not that many pure Dere Dere characters that are like Asuho, and that they're just naturally affectionate and likable towards the main character, but without the Dere Dere being her only defining trait. In fact, she mixes that with her love for the stars, her role of being an astronomy club leader, as well as wanting to take care of her family restaurant. At number 26, I have Rina Mochizuki from Fureraba. In my opinion, Rina easily highlights the main theme of Fureraba, aka turning from friend to lover. Even though the main protagonist of Fureraba is kind of a cringe, open pervert, Rina is somehow able to find a way to joke around with him, and she's just a joy to be around a lot of the time. Her route gives her surprisingly great character depth that I actually wish had more screen time. At number 25, I have Kanai Otori from Fullmetal Daemon Muramasa. I'll admit, I was not expecting to see a weirdo, quirky kind of character in an action-oriented adult woman in a dark action visual novel in Muramasa, but I'm definitely taking it. Almost half the time Kanai talked was hilarious as hell to watch. She was always throwing out random English, goofy rebuttals to a lot of the things that was happening between Kageyaki and her servant, but also her route was just quite interesting to see in relation to her past. At number 24, I have Tadakatsu Minamoto, or Gen-san, from the Majikoi series. There's a common question of who's the best tsundere in visual novels, and many times I've tempted to say Gen. I always thought the jokes of how he makes snarky remarks to the Kazuma family and many other characters while secretly being the low-key mom of the group, usually finding a way to be a bro and help out the characters with any little issue, was great. Definitely the best bro character and male tsundere I can think of. Number 23, I have Eika Shiraki from Yume Miru Kusuri. Eika on the surface just seems like your typical shy girl, and while she is, since Yume Miru Kusuri is a very psychological visual novel, you get to see very quickly that why the way she is due to her being bullied. I read her route first, and it very much set the stage of what to expect from the visual novel, and how you feel bad for Eika. However, what really pushed her up this high was her development, especially in the romantic aspect, which led to a really hilarious but great plot twist. At number 22, I have Yukie Mayuzumi from Majikoi. Another shy girl, but once again, I like a lot for the wholesomeness. Yukie is definitely one of the goofier, shy characters I know. While she has that thing of wanting to make 100 friends, she also has that funny gimmick of using ventriloquism to talk with her horse-shaped keychain. With the whole thing of her wanting to get more friends being very relatable, and seeing the growth Yukie gets, especially in her route, I quite liked her growth in the story. At number 21, I have Wanko, or Kazuko Kawakami from Majikoi. On most fan polls from the West, I see Wanko tends to top them, which makes complete sense. I think Wanko's by far the easiest character to like of the original main 5 heroines. She's very tomboyish, but also a very good sport in terms of how the characters make fun of her, and it's just generally pretty funny and energetic. But what probably sticks out for her for many people is how her route turned out. It ended up being a lot more serious than many people expected, especially for a character with her personality. It made for some very real moments, but interesting developments for her. At number 20, I have Sachi Mitsuhiro from Shara no Kuni. I put Sachi this high mostly because I really liked her story in chapter 2 of Shara no Kuni. Her base personality isn't anything too special to me, just kind of a lazy but Genki girl. But the character development and psychological stuff that she went through in her chapter is still one of the most memorable and well-paced stories I've seen in a visual novel to date. Also just very unique. At number 19, I have Asuka Kudashina from Aokana. When I was reading Aokana, Asuka to me felt like a Dere Dere female version of Goku from the Dragon Ball series. She's openly affectionate towards the main character, Masaya, but at the same time is very competitive in Flying Circus. I know some people criticize how great she gets at the sport really quickly despite being new, but to me, all her crazy feats just made the Flying Circus action stuff very entertaining, so I had zero complaints since it made most of her matches pretty hype. At number 18, I have Miyako Shina from Majikoi. For the longest time, she was easily my favorite Magikoi girl, and while I've since cooled down on her, I still think she's up there for one of my favorites. Honestly, a lot of the reason I like her a lot is just because I think her constant sexual jokes towards Yamato are unique and hilarious, even though in real life, someone like her would just be ridiculously creepy. At number 17, I have Kazusa Sakaki from Under One Wing. I've said this a few times in this video already, but I'm generally not a fan of tsundere characters. However, Kazusa is easily my favorite female tsundere. Despite having some typical tsundere personality traits, she's actually surprisingly down-to-earth and mature, with my biggest praise for her being her actually choosing to apologize when she knows she's the one at fault when accidental pervert moments happen, instead of, by default, blaming and hitting the main character when it wasn't his fault. She also happens to have decent character development in her route, which helps a lot. At number 16, I have Forni from Symphonic Rain. Unfortunately, Symphonic Rain is kind of a spoiler-heavy slice-of-life drama visual novel, so all I'll say is that the more you learn about Forni, the more wholesome and great she gets, and she already starts off pretty likable. At number 15, I have Risa Omi from Wanko to Kuraso. I still think it's hilarious that in a visual novel that's supposed to specialize in dog girl heroines, the most easily stick out one is a human character. It's hard to say why I like her so much, besides the fact that she's just really friendly and likable and has some surprisingly great wholesome moments, especially in her route, both with the main character and the dog girls. And I will never forget the scene where the main character finds out her secret pleasure stash, how it actually affects their relationship in a kinda serious way going forward. At number 14, I have Chiffon McDougall from Meteor World Actor. Chiffon is definitely the token weirdo girl of the main heroines of Meteor World Actor. It definitely fits my tastes. Her constant jokes about her being poor, looking for ways to make money, growing plants, and even apparently being a really deep sleeper to the point of crashing into walls made her constantly hilarious. However, in her route, she was also just surprisingly genuinely wholesome towards Ruka, the main character, being one of the few that is almost 100% nice to him. But she also had some interesting stuff about her race that I wish was expanded more on in her route. At number 13, I have Wakana Karia from Sabbath of the Witch. There's not many super tomboys I give overt praise to, but Wakana is definitely one of them, especially considering she's from a Ubisoft visual novel. I liked from the beginning she was one of the girls that just kind of felt like one of the guys and was willing to be blunt while still being very helpful towards the two guys she hung out with a lot, as well as helping other people. Her route, while a side route, was probably still one of my favorite side routes in any visual novel to date due to how wholesome it is and how she gets a surprising amount of love from the writers in terms of giving her insert songs that the other main heroines of Sanoma don't even have. At number 12, I have Shina Kisu from Sankaku Renai. I've read a lot of slice-of-life visual novels, and it feels pretty fitting to have at least one heroine who is a big eroge or visual novel-loving female. What helps is that she makes constant jokes and references to eroge tropes when she attempts to interact with her friends and whenever she hits on the main character. Shina is just constantly hilarious and has surprisingly sort of interesting depth in her route, but overall, she just represents what I love most about Asa Project, constant hilarity. At number 11, I have Erika Fururo from the Umineko series.
Oh yeah! Very good!
Erika, by far and away, is easily my favorite villain in any visual novel. Usually villains in visual novels tend to be okay at best for me, or either underwhelming, or just too edgy, or not enough screen time. However, I like that Erika was just straight up a bitch right from the minute she shows up. She just starts off kind of calm and mildly manipulative, but then it doesn't take her long before she gets extremely savage towards every major character outside the witches. Her version of trolling easily made the answer arcs of Umineko a lot more entertaining than I was expecting. What helps is she has a pretty decent amount of English too during her villainous moments, which helps make it even more entertaining. A very quick honorable mention before I get to the top 10. I read Kunado Chronicles quite a bit after I made the initial ranking, and I would put Yuri somewhere in the top 20. Similar to Kazusa from Under One Wing, even though she's a tsundere, I actually like her quite a bit for a number of reasons. She actually had a good reason to be soon towards the main character at first, and wasn't particularly physically violent, which is always nice. She started off with an overly serious, strict personality, but had some of the best personal development in the whole visual novel, and ended up having a very wholesome personality, role, and route in the visual novel. Kunado Chronicles has an interesting setting where gender roles are reversed for romantic and sexual relationships, and oh boy, Yuri definitely took advantage of that with how much she led the relationship in a fun way. At number 10, I have the Kopo Club captain, though apparently her real name is Torako from the Machikoi series. She's easily one of my favorite minor characters in visual novels. It's worth noting that she was so minor that in the original Machikoi, she didn't even have a sprite, but I still thought she was hilarious there since she was just a character with an older sounding voice, English, and broken Japanese. However, Machikoi S onwards actually gave her a sprite, a more moe voice, and a ridiculous outfit that just added more to the ridiculous, hilarious nature of her character. Machikoi characters are already kind of weird by default, but Torako might take the cake as the weirdest girl in the whole series. She may not have had the highest amount of screen time, nor have had a real route, but anytime she was on screen was a guaranteed laugh for me. At number 9, I have Hikari from Harem Kingdom. Even though I'm not a fan of isekais or polyamory romance, I still got enjoyment from Harem Kingdom, and a pretty good amount of it was because of how much I ended up liking Hikari. She easily rose up to one of my favorite childhood friend characters. She was both college-aged, but also just incredibly, hilariously savage. Despite that, she still has some subtle childhood friend tropes without being too tropey. In fact, one of the later reveals about her in her harem route was easily one of the most memorable parts of the whole visual novel, even though I thought her harem route was otherwise not really something I particularly cared for. At number 8, I have Ayumi Hojo from Sujiro-san no Junai Road. To this day, Ayumi is still easily my favorite minor character without a route. I'll admit, I was initially attracted to her design with her goofy, swirly glasses, but what made her stick out to me was her surprisingly mildly quirky and motherly-like personality, but also her role in befriending Ai Sujiro, a character in the universe that's considered very scary to even interact with, and Ayumi's relationship and how she interacted with Ai was probably easily my favorite relationship in the whole game, beating any of their romantic ones. At number 7, I have Shizuru Nakatsu from Rewrite. She may not be my favorite from this visual novel, which you'll see shortly, but Shizuru is pretty easily my second favorite character, both from Rewrite, but also from all key visual novels. While she may not have Kotori's quirky, hilarious English comedy, she more than makes up for it with her incredible wholesomeness, especially towards how affectionate she is towards the main character, Kotaro. All this without making this her whole character. In fact, Shizuru has some really deep stuff about her that was pretty feelsy, and I honestly wish her past got more screen time and attention, since her actual route content kinda disappointed me. At number 6, I have Lena Lixinyauer from Senran Banka. Forerunner characters tend to be hit or miss in visual novels for many people, just because they end up being too quirky, annoying, or obvious joke characters. While Lena is really hilarious, Ubisoft thankfully did not just make her a pure joke character. Don't get me wrong, she definitely starts off very, very hilarious and was easily the highlight for me with her constant random English and funny Japanese saying misunderstandings. But even in the common route, and especially in her route, Lena gets surprisingly wholesome. She ends up being a surprisingly big part of some of the major supernatural plot drama of Senran Banka, and her romance with the main character is very pure and nice to watch. At number 5, I have Naruko Nakisaki from Bokuten. While Naruko isn't the highest childhood friend on this list, I'd say she overall showcases the absolute best traits of childhood friend characters that I can think of the whole list. Starting from when she shamelessly jumps through the main character's window with only a sweater and underwear on at the way beginning of the game, just to tell him breakfast is ready. That alone sets the stage for her character. But not only is she helpful towards the main character, she's quite helpful for helping other girls with their romance issues at school. Naruko has surprisingly good depth that you figure out in her route. And while the execution of her route wasn't my favorite, it definitely was not due to Naruko's character, who herself definitely made a great showing of being the absolute best she could be, and proved what a great childhood friend love interest she was. At number 4, I have Ayame Himekami from If You Love Me, Then Say So, or sometimes called Suki Suki. If you've come this far, you've probably noticed I like a lot of characters because they're wholesome. However, of all the characters on this list, I think Ayame is just by far the most pure wholesome character in the whole list. I'm sadly not a big fan of Suki Suki as a whole, and the whole reason I even bothered reading to begin with is because I loved Ayame from minute 1, where you find her unable to even order from a fast food restaurant just because she is from a wealthy family and didn't have experience. The rest of her interactions are just a bunch of her being very nice to the main character and every main heroine. It was always fun to hang out with her, playing video games, going to fast food restaurants, her taking part of a lot of funny misunderstandings and stuff like that. All this while not making her affection to the main protagonist her whole character. She actually had her own interests and was willing to stick up for her beliefs. It's just a shame her route itself was particularly not well executed. At number 3, I have Hinami Yamada from A Sky Full of Stars. Hinami is easily my favorite character who only gets a route in a fan disc. It says something where in the original visual novel, when she only appeared a little in some routes, she wasn't even on my radar for a top 50 list, despite her being fairly likable. However, it was her role in a bunch of routes in the fan disc Fine Days that pushed her up to being top 10. Her actual route is a lot shorter than I wish it were, but it was just so wholesome and funny, it made me realize how much Hinami actually really fit my taste personality-wise. It helps that she has a surprising amount of feelsy moments as well, especially in Hikari's Fine Days route, and the currently untranslated Interstellar focus. She may be an unpredictable girl with a hard-to-understand imagination, but at the end of the day, she was just a kohai who wanted to be useful. A great example of how to make a girl both hilarious yet wholesome. At number 2, I have Kotori Kanbe from Rewrite. For the longest time, she was by far and away my favorite visual novel character. Many people on the internet likely still know me for being the Kotori Kanbe fan, though I certainly wasn't the only one, just probably one of the loudest. Anyway, Kotori was one of those few characters where I actually looked at her design and immediately knew that I would like her a lot from even before I read the visual novel. I loved her quirky, goofy comedy in the visual novel right from the beginning, especially all the random English, taking part of Kotaro's almost equally goofy humor, and her random puns and stuff. She also has a surprising role as the motherly-like character of the main crew, always making sure everyone's getting food and stuff. Kotori is also just quite deep, and the stuff you learn about her in her route definitely makes her a lot more real as a character than you'd expect, even if sometimes she probably isn't the easiest to communicate with. If a certain visual novel did get translated in early 2020, there's a high chance Kotori would still pretty easily be my number 1 character in visual novels to this day. However, at number 1, I have Mashiro Tsukino from Making Lovers. To say that Mashiro surprisingly blew me away would be selling her short. When researching Making Lovers, I did figure Mashiro would be my favorite based on the tags on VDB, or at least my favorite from the main heroines. But little did I know how much she would really fit my taste. When I started actually reading her route, it was almost like Smee researched my taste in visual novel and anime girls and tailor-made a heroine that was made for me. If you thought Kotori's awkward, quirky humor was already pretty funny, Mashiro goes even harder on that, basically going as far as being a constant goofy, quirky clown for most of her route. I thought a lot of her super weird and random comments were consistently hilarious, and to me, fits the definition of never a dull moment, but in the best way. However, despite her constant hilarious moments and really good interactions with the main character, I still thought her actual romance was done pretty well. For a moege, they did give her a decent amount of depth, mostly related to her insecurities about herself as a love interest, especially considering how she asked out the main character very quickly. Mashiro just also has a lot of random little things that help push her over the top, like how she's actually adult age, likes video games, likes really similar food to me, and other stuff. Mashiro certainly isn't perfect, and I can see why she's slightly more polarizing among many other Making Lovers characters. But when you're a fan of Mashiro, you're a big fan of Mashiro, because there's just not really many characters that are written like her. And for someone who likes quirky, weirdo girls like me, Mashiro fits really perfectly for my taste, and I'm very thankful to Smee for making her a delight to read. While her fan disc route was super weird, which I guess was fitting for her, it at least kept Mashiro herself very funny, even if it was really short. If you've made it this far, or you skipped ahead using timestamps, then congrats, you made it towards the end of the video. And now, I will show a tier list representation of my top 100 characters very quickly. Hopefully, through this video, you learned more about my tastes, or even better, you may have even found a few characters or visual novels that interest you. So hopefully you could potentially try any of these visual novels yourself and give it a shot. If you have any questions or comments about my tastes, any of the characters or visual novels shown, feel free to leave a comment below.